All right, let's get going. Let's talk about teaching evil. Woo, feedback. And you might be wondering, what on earth do I mean by teaching evil? If you take a look at the title of this talk, you can probably guess that I'm talking about offensive training, but the topic is actually a little bit different than that. What I'm really talking about is a motivational strategy for raising awareness about information security. And yes, my slides are very, very gimmicky. I am one of those guys. Hopefully we can all agree that awareness is important. In fact, according to a number of reports, including this one from ISACA for just last year, the most prevalent successful attacks hinge on the human factor. And I'm not even going to bother showing the supporting evidence because I think it's fairly widely agreed at this point that the weakest point in the security chain continues to be people, right? We've known this for years, it's been true for a long time, and it's still true today, which is why I'm going to assert that another unacceptably weak link in the chain is what we're doing about people. For example, take another report from IBM from this year. In a passage about the prevalence of threats specifically to the healthcare sector, they comment that organizations should focus on educating employees about phishing and how to avoid becoming a victim using a variety of approaches, et cetera, require training at intervals to make the risk clear. And while that's actually better advice than most reports give out, and while it sounds good on the surface, there's really no depth to that. It's really kind of empty advice. We know that humans are the weakest link in the security chain, and the only advice we keep giving out is tell them don't be a weak link anymore. If you've got problems with your humans, just train them better. But that leaves us with a question. When it comes to fixing people, how do we do it? How do we train them better? And the answer that I've come up with is teach them evil. It's by no means revolutionary to teach offensive techniques to would-be defenders. It's not revolutionary either to consider that everyone in the organization has to be regarded as a defender. And that's all we're really doing. The goal is to construct an educational experience that gets the participants interested in recognizing and defending against attack. Right? It's not enough to say that we want to get people to do the right thing because we're already there, right? It's part of the problem. Bad guys know that people want to be helpful and do the right thing. Every social engineer knows that. That's why confidence tricks work. So my concept of teaching evil is about reconceptualizing what the right thing is. The core idea is not to motivate people to want to do the right thing. The core idea is to motivate people to want to do the security conscious thing. Because if you can do that, you can actually have a meaningful conversation about defense, right? You can talk about recognizing phish. You can talk about doing secure coding and so forth, right? It's not, and so when I talk about awareness, it's not just knowledge of a problem, it's instilling a desire to fix the problem. So that's what I'm going to spend my time talking about, or at least it's the conclusion that I hope to get to after this bizarre roller coaster of facts that I'm about to spew at you. I mean to discuss philosophies of education, motivation, some tools and techniques that I believe don't work, some that I believe do, and how I do instructional design. Of course, this is all my own experience. I really just want to give you some tips and tricks, show you things that I've done, things that I've learned. I am not trying to sell you anything, and I don't even need you to hire me. Now, if you're wondering who I am one of those people who does not usually introduce myself during a presentation. Either my content stands on its own or it does not. So I'll just say that while I am something of a security enthusiast, I do not actually work in a security department or on a security team. But what I am, and what I've been for about 20 years or so, is someone with a keen interest in how people learn. And when I realized that my organization had a need for both more and better security awareness, I decided to put together something and have a little fun building Evil School. The story begins when I was visiting a remote office. And one of my colleagues out there asked why his way back-end application server wasn't able to reach out to the internet. Now the app was doing data crunching. It was ETL kind of work, and it really had no business contacting anything out on the internet, except that the dev, for reasons that are neither here nor there, thought that he could make something better if it could. And my first natural security guy reaction was to berate him for his idiocy. Except I'd been doing this new thing where I tried to understand people's points of view, and what I realized is that I had an engineer whose mandate was simply to make it all work. Right? And maybe he was crazy, or maybe I was the one who was crazy, but it just wasn't part of his world to think about securing his application because somebody else does that firewall stuff. And all of the security controls that kept getting put in place were just obstacles that this poor guy had to work around. And this clearly wasn't a productive place to be. So I asked myself, how might we fix this situation? And how do we fix it in such a way that this dev and potentially anybody else in the org would want to include security in their thought process? Or, put another way, how do you get somebody to unlearn certain behaviors and then motivate them for others? Now, of course, the internet is full of information on how people learn. One of my favorite theories comes from this guy, Dr. Howard Gardner, circa the early 1980s. And what he suggested was that people have multiple intelligences, basically multiple ways in which we are smart and which we are able to learn. But that's not all, because Gardner also raises an important argument. He says that educators must teach to the understanding of their students. And that makes a certain obvious kind of sense when you think about it, but it's far easier said than done. For example, when is the last, similar to multiple intelligence theory is VARK theory, right? Which I'd imagine you're at least peripherally aware. It says that people can be visual, audio, reading, kinetic learners, but when's the last time that you tried to explain a firewall ACL in audio terms, right? I'm not saying it can't be done, it's simply not a place that we typically think of going to. And maybe that's at least part of why we struggle with people being the weakest link in our security chain. Maybe we're just not teaching to everyone's understanding. So knowing these theories, I decided to do some research to help me think about how to communicate my message a little bit better. And being a security guy and a tech guy, I wanted to find something with a real scientific basis to go on. What I found was an excellent paper from the Merits Institute entitled "The Neuroscience of Learning: A New Paradigm for Corporate Education." Let's get a cool title, and it looks great on a slide. My favorite part was this line. It says, "When developing training for business environments, we spend most of our time focused on the content we want people to know rather than how they will learn.